Alrighty, so let's go ahead and set up our interact. One thing I did is I changed our name of our character, or our first person character, to BP player. It's just something that's going to be a little bit easier to manage as we go forward instead of constantly trying to search for first person character. All right, so to get started, let's go ahead and go to our toolkit. I'm going to add a new folder here called systems. And then within systems, I'm going to add another new folder and I'm going to call this interaction. So everything related to interaction, we'll just go ahead and go into here. If I cut out, don't mind me, I'm just kind of coughing. So let's go ahead and get started with our first thing we need to add. If we go to edit here and project settings, we're going to go ahead and search here and type in trace. Now, what we're doing with traces is essentially we don't want our interaction trace interacting with every single thing in our world. That's going to be very expensive, very cumbersome, and kind of annoying. So we need to set up a new trace channel, or a channel that basically is only detectable when we set up something to be detected by it. So if we have this line shooting out, anything that has this new trace channel called, you guessed it, interact, we'll go ahead and default response block, get a signal that says, "Hey, this trace has hit us." It's saying interact, and this is what we're doing, right? So let's just get that out of the way. Next thing we have to do is add an interaction, BPI interface. So let's go ahead and go here, right-click, blueprint interface, and we're going to do BPI underscore interact. And really quick, an interface is something that's pretty cool. And just to give you like a little bit of a visual, because I'm also a visual learner, an interface is a way for two blueprints to interact essentially and connect. So let's say this is a blueprint actor, holding down Alt to duplicate. This is another one. I can use an interface to say, hey, something happened here. I'm sending a signal that something needs to happen here, right? So if the player kicks this thing or interacts with this cube and I want to send this cube this way, I can use an interface to do that. They're pretty common, they're pretty lightweight, and they're super versatile. So it's a pretty common way to get interaction systems working. All right, so let's go ahead and open up our blueprint interface here. It's going to prompt you to add a new function immediately, which is fine. We're actually going to add two. So the first one is going to be look at, and we're going to have two outputs. The first one is going to be called action, and it's going to be of type text. Second one is going to be object, and you guessed it, text. What this function is doing is it's basically saying that when our line trace hits an object that can be interacted with, it's going to tell us what action do you want to do with the thing that you have seen, and what is the thing you have seen. Kind of self-explanatory, but I just want to explain what we're doing before we do it. We need one more function, and this one is going to be called, let's call it interact with. How about that? So this is what we're actually going to be interacting with, or calling when we interact with it. So let's add an input here, and we're going to call this player character. And the type is going to be BP underscore player, because we renamed our player, right? So it's easier to find, and we know exactly what we're talking about when we search for this. Essentially, what this input is saying is when we're interacting with, we're saying, hey, who is interacting with this? And we just want to make sure that it's the player so we can validate some information before we move forward. All right, next thing we want to do is let's just add a test object. So we're going to go to blueprint class, actor, BP, test object. You could use this for other systems in the future. We're going to keep it in interaction for now. You can copy it, make it a duplicate. You can make a child blueprint of it. That's fine, whatever you want to do. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and add a cube. Super simple. And the main thing we're paying attention to is the class setting here. We're going to click class settings, implemented interfaces, and we're going to type in BPI interact. Awesome. So when I hit compile and save, you might notice that two more functions showed up here on the side. We have an interact with and a look at. So what's kind of cool about these is that they're both different colors, so I'll tell you two different things. The yellow one is going to be pulled right here in the event graph, and this grayed out one is going to be its own separate function. So for this test object, we're going to interact and we're going to say kick, and this is a cube. So we're going to kick the cube, right? And then interact with, just for testing purposes, if you notice when I double click that, it brought us to the event graph. We're going to do a print string and we're going to say the cube has been kicked. Awesome. I'm going to change this to red and we'll have it sit for 5 seconds. And this is going to show up on the top left-hand side of the screen. Fun fact, really quick, if you don't want your output log to actually have this printed, you could uncheck that. And if you don't want it on the screen and you want it on the output log, you could uncheck this. Up to you. I just keep both because it's super simple. And that's what we're doing for now. So next thing we need to do is head on over to our player. And we need to do a few things. One, we need to set up a input for our interaction. We need to set up our interaction trace. And basically what happens when we press our interact button, right? So let's go ahead and do the interaction trace first, because that's going to be the most complex, and we're going to dive in. Now, instead of doing it here in the event graph, we're going to go ahead and create a function, because this is going to be a reusable piece of code, and we're going to call this interaction trace. So this is going to be one of the more complex things that we do, and I could very easily explain what we're going to do and plug it all in, but I want you to understand what we're doing. So we're going to talk it out as we go. So we're going to pull off this pin and do line trace by channel. And what this is going to do is essentially draw a red debug line from our camera, where our eyeballs are, to exactly where we want our player to look. Trace visibility, what we're going to go ahead and do is move this to interact, right? Because that's a new trace that we just made. Let's go ahead and go down here. We make sure that ignore self is checked. For the debug, we're going to go ahead and do for 1 frame. Otherwise, it's just going to every second, it's going to put thousands of them on the frame, and we don't want to do that. Let's just double check our stuff here. Awesome. This looks good. So the first thing we want to do is get the location of our camera. And I'm going to go ahead and visualize this for you. Oh, let's get more sideways. There we go. Let's break this down. Here's what we're going to want to do visually. The first thing we want to do is grab the location of this camera. We also want to detect where is the forward location of this camera. And then what we want to do is draw an interaction trace or a line from that camera for, whatever length it may be. It could be shorter than this if you want. It could be longer. It really doesn't matter. It's up to you. And then when we interact with something, right? Let's say we interacted. We're going to go ahead and call a new type of function here that says, hey, listen. If you're Zelda fans, there's my pun. And we'll send some signals to what we just, interacted with or hovered over, right? Does that make sense? Cool. So let's go ahead and go to our interaction trace. And the first thing we're going to do is, again, we talked about the camera. So let's go ahead and grab our first person camera out here. And what did we need from the camera? We needed its location. So for that, we're going to do our get world location. If I can type, that'd be fantastic. Awesome. We're going to get our world location, and that's where we want that trace to start, right? We want it to start at this camera's location. So let's go ahead and plug that in there. Next thing we want is our forward location, right? We talked about that. Which way is forward when looking through this camera? So let's go ahead and get our forward vector. Handy tools, you'll be using these quite often. So we could just do a start to end, but that's going to look absolutely ridiculous and not do the math that we want it to do because we're missing the interaction range component, right? So to do that, we're going to get our forward vector and multiply it. We're going to convert this really quick to a float. We're going to multiply it by a certain range. You could pick whatever range you like. If you like it really far, you could do 500. If you want it super, super close, you could do 50, 75, 100, whatever it may be. But what I like to do is go ahead and take this value and let's go ahead and promote it to a variable. And we're going to call this interaction range. Press compile and save. And what this does is it saved my default value. And now if I'm over here in my viewport and we've got a bunch of other code going on, I can go ahead and go, I'm not really liking the interaction range. Let me click this and I can change it from here. And I don't have to go digging into additional functions, if that makes sense, right? So now we have our forward vector. We have the range of which is going to move. and we need to make sure that we're adding it to our location. So drag off and press plus. Go ahead and drag this in here, and that's going to be our ends location. Does that make sense? So I'm a big fan of comments, so let's go ahead and drag this out. We'll go ahead and comment it. We just did a get camera plus its direction, draw from the direction, and then the length is equal to the float value. Pretty simple. Go ahead and drag this out here, off to the side. And let's move on to what happens when something is interacted with, right? So we have two nodes here, an out hit and a return value. The first thing we want to do is make sure that we're actually hitting something. So let's go ahead and add a branch. And really quick, in case you forgot, I hold down the B key, B as in boy, and left click, and that's our shortcut for a branch. So let's add our return value. And on the out hit, we're going to go ahead and do something called a break hit result. So this type value here is a hit result structure. It's a struct. So a struct has a multitude of different information that we can access. Just to give you a hint of what we can potentially access, there's a good example. It's absolutely insane. It's pretty cool though. So what we want to do is find our hit actor, right? Because that's what we're caring about right now. So off of the hit actor, we're going to go ahead and do a promote to variable. And we're going to call this the look at actor. Again, if I could type, good Lord. So off of this, we need to set basically what we're looking at as a variable, because this is what's going to help us determine what our interaction is and what we're doing, right? But we also need to check if our other hit actor has the interface that we're looking for. So we're going to say does object implement interface. And if you want to take a wild guess at what we're going to search here, be my guess, but it's BPI interact. And before we set this node, we're going to add another branch and plug this in here. We're going to clean this up in just 1 second. But essentially what we're saying here is, does the hit actor, first of all, are we hitting something? If we are, we're going to run the rest of the code. And if we're not, let's actually do this. We're going to hit Control C, Control V. We're going to set the look actor to empty, right? Because think about it. Our line trace is drawing. Did we hit something? If we did, does it actually add this interface? If it does, then let's go ahead and set our look actor and put that information in front of the screen. Again, that information is with our test object. Let's go ahead and put it out here. This is essentially saying, hey, we're going to kick the cube. Remember, kick the cube? Great. So we're looking at the cube, and that's going to provide us the information that we want. Otherwise, if we're not looking at the cube, we're just going to set the look actor to nothing because we don't need any information from it. Right? And then after we do that, we are going to go ahead and call our look at BPI interact message. And what is the target here? It's going to be the hit actor. And really quick, let's just go ahead and clean this up because this is going to slowly start driving me absolutely insane. To do a reroute node, you could find the line, hover over it, and double click. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to pull this down just a smidge. Q. Let's pull this over. Let's go ahead and drag this from here because it's the same thing. Ignore that. Perfect. And awesome. Just a little bit smoother, right? Okay. So before we set up something for like a widget or something to actually display to the player, what we're going to want to do really quick is print it out to the console, right? So off of here, let's go ahead and grab a print string. This is just temporary. We just need to make sure things are working. If you notice, this is a string and this is a text, so it's going to be slightly different. We're going to right-click openly here and do a format text option, right? And we're going to take this result, plug it in. It's going to convert it for us. Awesome. I love that. We have two options here, but one line. So this is really cool. We're going to be doing this a lot more with UI. We're going to go ahead and do a curly brace, right? And we're going to type in the word action and then another curly brace, space, You guessed it, curly brace again, object, another curly brace. Now when I press enter, I have two options to plug in here, and we're just going to go ahead and plug those in here. Awesome. So now when I do the look at, it should display what we're looking at, the action and the object, right? But we do have to do something really quick. Let's go back to our event graph. Where are we? There we are. Let's call our interaction. So let's grab event tick. And just to call this out, this is kind of a big no-no. Don't really use this for a lot of game options. With the scope of our game in our project, it's okay for now, but your engineers will definitely yell at you if you do this. So we're going to click and drag our interaction trace out onto our event tick. This is basically saying every single frame, please draw this line and make sure that we can see it. Cool. So let's go ahead and go back to our first person map. If you haven't already, drag out your test object into the world. We're going to go ahead and click play, and we're going to get close enough, and you can see on the left-hand side it says kick cube, kick cube, kick cube. Keep kicking it. Cool. Let's go ahead and pause here essentially. Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and set up the interaction itself, right? So to do that, let's go ahead and go back into our player actions. We're going to right-click, do an input action, IA, interact. Let's go ahead and open this up and make sure that our defaults are good. Cool. Open up our default. Let's go ahead and get our new mapping for our interact. Why did I say input? Good Lord. Interact. Here we go. And then go ahead and pick the key that you want your interaction to be. I am a huge fan of E. Some people do F. Don't know why. I'm not going to judge you for it. I will if I play your game, but that's okay. But go ahead and put whatever you'd like. I like E. What we're going to do on the player is essentially say when we press interact, so IA, interact, enhanced action events, we're going to do on started, we're going to do interact with as the message. But before we do that, we need to go ahead and take our look at actor and make sure that this is valid. Otherwise, we're going to get an error. Because essentially, if we try to press this and interact with this code and nothing's happening, it's not understanding what's going on, right? And that's how you get a red error or a crash or a fatal error, whatever it may be. So to avoid that, we're going to drag our look at actor, hold down Control. Awesome. And what's cool, instead of doing a branch and saying, is this right? Can we validate this? You could just right click this and then convert it to a validated get. So essentially what we're saying is, hey, is this even valid? If it is, let's run the code. If not, we're not going to do anything. So our look at actor is going to be the target, and our player character, we're just going to get a reference to ourself because that's where we are, the player character. Sweet deal. Now we did set up this test object, so when we do hit it, you should see the cube has been kicked. You just might have to do it really quick because we're actually interacting with this the whole time. Cool. So we have our interaction working. And the next thing we're going to do is move that blue code on the left-hand side to an actual widget that pops up instead of spamming our screen. So here's something really funny. I actually pressed record and somehow stopped at mid-recording, and I already implemented everything. So instead of doing the walkthrough like we're going to do, I'm going to show you the end result and explain how we got there. That's my bad. I'm new to this, but apparently pressing and making sure that I'm still recording is a hard thing to do. That's okay. So let's go ahead and open up our interaction system, and we're going to create a new widget blueprint. You're going to right-click and go down to User Interface and Widget Blueprint. We're going to go ahead and click this one. There are advanced classes. We're not worried about those right now, but just click User Widget, and you could set the naming convention yourself. You could do WBP for Widget Blueprint. You could do W for Widget. I like just W. Let's go ahead and open this up, and you're going to be brought to this screen. Really quick, the first thing we're going to need is a canvas panel. And essentially what that's going to do is this is our screen. This is what the player's looking at. This is what's going to happen, and this is what's contained in there. Go ahead and click that and drag that out to the side. We don't need to change any settings here. Next thing we need is a border. We're going to go ahead and search border here, and you can click and drag that directly onto the canvas panel. It'll make it a child, and then we can change none of these settings. You're good, don't worry about it. Next thing we're going to go ahead and do here, actually, I'm just kidding. The border is what we're changing. So in order to change this, let's go ahead and make sure the border is selected. I believe the default is going to look something like this. That's my bad. I was going to edit the text. And yeah, that should be about what we're looking, right? So click on the border. Go ahead and go to your anchors because we want this in the bottom middle of our screen. And we're going to go ahead and click to reset this property to its default value down below. Perfect. The alignment, we're going to do 0.5. And the reason why I do 0.5 is because we want it more centered in this screen here. And then the Y, we're going to do 1. Just bring it up slightly. And actually, we're going to bring it up just a little bit more, minus 100. That's a good location, I think, here. Yeah. And then for the size, let's go ahead and do 400. And then for the Y, I'm going to do 70. 70 looks good to me. We could do 70. And we do need information inside this box here. So for that, we're going to add text. Go ahead and click and drag text onto the border. It'll make it a child. Important thing to note here, we need to check is variable. And go ahead and rename it to something that you're going to recognize and notice. And then the only other thing we want to do is make sure that it is aligned horizontally and vertically. If you want to, you can add a text here. You can leave this blank. I blank it out, but you could do test. And then if you want to, you could adjust the size. You could change the color. It's really up to you. Your pick. When you're done figuring out exactly what you want, head on over to the graph. We do not need the event tick for the construct, so go ahead and get rid of that. What we do need is this pre-construct and a set text node. In order to get this, you can't drag off of this pin. You need to drag off of this text interact notice that we set just a second ago. And we're going to click and drag and do set text. There's two options. We're looking for the one that has text in parentheses. Why? Because we need information right here. What we're going to do now is click off of that and promote to variable. I'm not going to do it because I already did it, but it's right here. I named it interaction notice text. And two major things that we need here. The default is fine. You don't really need a default, but you need instance editable checked, and you also need expose on spawn. Go ahead and make sure to expose the spawn is set, but for instance editable, if you wanted to, you could click this little eye here. Either one works, right? Next thing we need is the event construct and a set timer by event. You search for that by set timer by event. There's two options. We want the shorter one, the one up top. And that's going to have you create, essentially what this is doing is, hey, when this notification pops up on the screen, how long do you want it to be there? You set the timer, and then when you're good, you don't want it there anymore, it'll just remove itself from the parent and disappear. So to do that, we're going to click off the event node, and we're going to do a create custom event, and then you're going to type in the name that you want. I named it clear interaction notice, and the code is very simple. Just remove it from the parent. And that's it. Super easy. So the interaction widget is set up. We're good to go. We actually don't need this anymore. Let's go ahead and head over to our player. And again, I already filled this out. I'm so sorry. We're going to go to where our print string was, right? If I remember correctly, our print string was right here, taking this place. You know what? Let's reset it up together. Why not? Our print string was here. This is what was happening, right? We no longer need the print string, so let's go ahead and remove that. What's going to happen is we're going to set up a do once node. And the reason why we're doing a do once node is if the player is down here and constantly moving back and forth an interactable object, you don't want that notification on the bottom of the screen to constantly be popping up, right? So in order to do that, we're going to go ahead and click here and do a do once. Awesome. And once we did do once, right, we're going to create our widget. And if you want to take an educated guess as to what we're putting in here, W interact. And if you notice, the reason why we made that instance editable on our widget, let's pull up our widget because I want to show you. This here is instance editable. And if you notice, that's what we're plugging in when we call this function here. So our result is going to be passed. And yeah, I believe that's the last thing we need. Oh, sorry, it's a computer. We need to tell it to add to the viewport because it's not going to assume that we wanted to add to the viewport just after we created it. And then we set up that return value. I went ahead and adjusted our comments here. First, let's make sure that this is working properly. There we go. Kick cube. And then after we leave, it disappears. And if I press E to interact, the cube has been kicked. Fantastic. So let's go ahead and clean up our code just a little bit. Previously, this was expanded. We can go ahead and click this to retract it. And I just set up some codes as what we're doing. These two here, we're just checking if we hit something. If we didn't, we're going to set the look actor to none because we don't want any errors. And we're going to check here if our object has this BPI interact. And over here, we just clumped these together and reorganized. If our actor has the BPI interact, we're going to set the looked actor to what we interacted with here and call that function. And then we're plugging in that function that we called all the way through our widget, so that way it's displayed to our player for player feedback. And if you haven't already, we're going to go ahead and move this event tick off of here because this is more of an initialization thing. So we'll keep it here towards the top for now. But I went ahead and commented out what our interact section is. And yeah, we're all set. That's interact.